Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Night 3 of the Republican National Convention commences in just a moment. You'll see the big opening right here as soon as it starts. You also hear from the first speaker tonight. That's Kristi Noem, the governor of beautiful South Dakota. We expect the speeches will continue with outgoing White House advisor Kellyanne Conway and an ender tonight from the Vice President of the United States. All of that starting soon right here on Fox and throughout the night. Also, a hurricane, the biggest of the year, a potentially dangerous hurricane, is about to hit the Louisiana and Texas coast. We've got a live update on that, too. But first, outside the convention, chaos that began with the first George Floyd protests on Memorial Day has reached its inevitable and bloody conclusion. Last night, 3 people were shot on the streets of Kenosha, Wisconsin. 2 of them have died. Police say they've charged a 17-year-old with murder. Here's what Kenosha looked like last night. Two people died. Many of the details remain hazy. Big media organizations have done their best to downplay and ignore the violence in Kenosha and around the country. But there were a few reporters on the scene last night. One of them, Richie McGinniss of the Daily Caller, was standing nearby when a man was shot in the head. McGinniss ripped off his T-shirt and used it to try and staunch the man's bleeding. Here's the scene.
Get away! Get me a light!
Put pressure on him! Put pressure on him!
Where, dude? Where? Where's the hole?
Wait, where are you here? Where? Here in his head, in his head! Come on! Put pressure, put pressure, put pressure! Put pressure! Hey, keep your eyes open, keep your eyes open.
Sorry for the painful video, but it's real. That man later died. At one point, the 17-year-old, who has now been charged, tried to run from the mob. He tripped and fell in the middle of the street. A man ran up and smashed him in the head with a skateboard. The 17-year-old then fired his gun. So what does that amount to? We're unsure. A court will decide whether what you just saw qualifies as self-defense. As of tonight, we really don't have more details. We do know why it all happened, though. Kenosha has devolved into anarchy because the authorities in charge of the city abandoned it. People in charge from the governor of Wisconsin on down refused to enforce the law. They stood back and they watched Kenosha burn. So are we really surprised that looting and arson accelerated to murder? How shocked are we that 17-year-olds with rifles decided they had to maintain order when no one else would? Everyone could see what was happening in Kenosha. It was getting crazier by the hour. Watch this scene from last night.
Tell the police, tell them back! Tell them back for taking us! Tell the police for taking us!
Kill the police, death to America. That's not Iran, it's Wisconsin. It could have been a dozen other places in this country. The violence has been building unabated for 3 months now. Every day the mob becomes more radical. By some accounts, 30 Americans have died so far in these riots. Democrats have openly encouraged them. Republican leaders have been too fearful to stop them. Some have applauded it all. 5 days into the first Minneapolis riots in May, as the city burned live on camera before everyone, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley took to Twitter to support the rioters. Quote, "It's important to understand that the death of George Floyd was personal and painful for many," Haley wrote. "In order to heal, it needs to be personal and painful for everyone." Well, Nikki Haley's wish came true. The riots have been personal and painful for this country, but not for Nikki Haley. She appears to be thriving. On Monday, Haley spoke in a featured spot at the Republican National Convention, and the media hailed her as the future of conservatism. Of course they did. They hate the Republican Party. A party that tolerates rioting has no future in a democracy. Human beings crave order. It's a prerequisite for life. They fear uncertainty above all. People will trade virtually anything for relief from chaos. That's a fact of human nature. It's always true. And politicians who understand that win. Rudy Giuliani got elected twice in an overwhelmingly Democratic city because he knew that underneath it all, everyone hates lawlessness. Everyone. Richard Nixon knew that too. Nixon was not a charming man. No one ever longed to have a beer with him. Yet Nixon managed to win what is to this day the single biggest blowout in American history, the 1972 elections. How did he do that? It was simple. Richard Nixon was for order. His opponent was for chaos. It wasn't hard. It's not hard now. Yet that lesson seems lost on this generation of leaders. Our cities are burning because the people in charge have allowed them to burn. Tonight, the White House is sending hundreds of additional National Guardsmen and military policemen to Kenosha, and that is a very good thing. But let's be honest, the Justice Department could have stopped all of this months ago. If federal prosecutors had treated the organizers of BLM and Antifa the way they treated Roger Stone, our cities wouldn't look like Kosovo tonight. But they didn't do that. Instead, they enforced standards selectively in direct violation of our most sacred American principle, which is equal protection under the law. They ignored that. Across the country, prosecutors responded to politically disfavored crimes with maximum aggression, and they ignored the rest. Just this Sunday, at a Catholic cathedral in Philadelphia, a woman was brutally assaulted in the aisle in the middle of a service. The attack was live streamed to the entire congregation at home in real time. There was no question what happened. It was on videotape. And yet the authorities in Philadelphia concluded it was not a big deal, so they're not pressing charges. Here's the crime they've decided to ignore. It's awful. But think bigger for a moment. What is the effect on the country, on the rest of us, when authorities allow assaults like the one you just saw, open threats and harassment and violence to go unpunished? What does that cause? Well, it increases tribalism, for one thing. It makes us hate each other, and that's why they're doing it. Our leaders want us to believe that this is all a racial conflict. They're always telling us it is, but they're lying. It is not a racial conflict. At its deepest level, the chaos they have unleashed has very little to do with race. Most Americans are not bigots. Unlike CNN, they are not fixated on skin color. They don't really care, most of them. What you're watching is more sinister than that. What you're watching is an effort by the academic left, funded by big business, to crush the last remaining resistance to their control of the country. And that resistance is an independent American middle class. That's who they really hate. This is not a race war. This is a class war. Remember that. Richie McGinniss found himself in the middle of all of it last night in Kenosha. He runs the video operation over at the Daily Caller. In the video he played a moment ago, you saw him trying to save that man's life with his T-shirt, unsuccessfully, sadly. Richie McGinniss joins us tonight. Richie, what did you see? First to the video that we played, which was just remarkable. What were the immediate circumstances around that?
Well, Tucker, we were out all night, and I initially encountered the alleged shooter at a business that had been burned the night previously, and we actually saw some of those people who worked at the business and some of the owners of the business trying to put the fires out themselves. And the next night, I encountered the alleged shooter at that business, and I actually asked him a few questions on camera. And later that evening, I saw the same individual in the street, drawing a lot of attention due to the fact that he had what I thought was an AR-15 strung over his shoulder. And so a lot of people were shouting at him, at which point I basically saw him start to run and heard the shots, and obviously you saw the rest on video.
From the video, it's not clear that there are any police around. There's a big mob, people have guns, shots are going off. Where were the cops?
Well, I'm in Kenosha with Shelby Talcott and Jorge Ventura, two of my colleagues, and we've been asking people all around town, business owners who've had their places looted, where were the police? And they said, it took 2 hours, it took an hour, it took the fire department 3 hours. So definitely they're there, but they're obviously not responding in any quick fashion. So the 17-year-old who I interviewed earlier in the night, he actually mentioned that he was there to maintain peace in the absence of police.
In one video that we played, he is being chased down the street. He's hit in the head with a skateboard. Why was that group of people chasing him? Do you know?
Well, I believe that the video that you're referring to took place after the initial shooting. So I think that at that point, they were basically looking for whoever had a weapon on them. And obviously, the weapon that he had was very noticeable. So I think that the video that you're referring to actually took place afterwards. But what I can say is prior to the first shooting that I witnessed, I did see a number of individuals pursuing the 17-year-old alleged shooter, and actually the individual who was shot, I did see him advance on him very closely, and you can actually see that in the video, although it's a bit far away. And I was actually maybe 6 or 7 feet behind them, so I saw it up close.
It's just hard to believe this is America. We can't put up with this. Richie McGinniss, I'm glad you're okay. Thank you for that report. I appreciate it.